Topper from 1937 was a very silly, supernatural-themed comedy movie starring Roland Young, Cary Grant, and Constance Bennett. I've heard of this film before, and it was fun to go exploring and get to watch this for the first time, to learn what it was about. And I say that it's supernatural, but truth be told, it's just more of a silly ghost film with wacky antics and not really anything spooky. It's just a fun romantic comedy with some supernatural elements. So the film opens up with Cary Grant as the character George Kirby and his wife Marion, played by Constance Bennett. Now, I've not seen her in anything before, but I thought personally she bore a resemblance to actress Amy Poehler from Parks and Recreation. Maybe it's just me. Cary Grant is, as usual, a goofy, cheerful cad, and I'd swear he was just born in a suit coat and tie. He just always has got that outfit on. Anyhow, he and his wife play a silly socialite couple, and they're out on the town drinking and singing and carrying on. They're out at a party. And early in the film, it was noteworthy to see that at the club they were at the piano, was a brief appearance by Hoagy Carmichael. He was memorable as a musician from the film To Have and Have Not with Bogart. He was the pianist at the piano with a toothpick in his mouth. So it's kind of fun to see him here. You know, I love watching these old films and slowly start, tying one actor or actress to another film and so on. Okay, it's just something geeky I like to do. All right, anyhow, Roland Young plays Mr. Cosmo Topper, a meek, mousy banker, and who, truth be told, is really the main star of this film. He's mild-mannered and placid, and he just kind of scurries through his daily routine. He wakes up, takes a shower on time, he mechanically eats the same things for breakfast each morning under the controlling, watchful eye of his very uptight wife, Mrs. Clara Topper, played here by actress Billie Burke, who was also noteworthy as the Good Witch Glinda from The Wizard of Oz. I mean, in fact, this character seemed oddly reminiscent of that character to me. But anyhow, they also have a stuffy old butler, Wilkins, who's played by Alan Mowbray, who doesn't really help things with his droll attention to details of time and punctuality. So all of this kind of sets the stage that this Cosmo guy is just kind of a mousy, boring little fella. He heads off to work at the bank as part of his usual routine, and there's a board meeting going on. Now, the character George shows up late and basically acts like a total goofball. Now, he's a stockholder, but he doesn't really seem to take the business very seriously. Marion shows up as well, visits with Topper at his office to kind of just playfully tease with him. The two of them just like to give this poor little guy a hard time, I think. They both seem to know him, and, they have no issues toying around with him because, he's just this uptight, serious person. Well, George and Marion are headed home in their car, and George is driving crazy fast, and he fails to make a turn. The car crashes, and in a non-graphic, but, it's obvious what happened, scene, we see that both of them have died in this car crash. In fact, their transparent, ghostly forms slowly get up from the ground and walk over, and they sit down on a log. It kind of reminded me of, the spirit Obi-Wan, when he goes to sit down on the log by Yoda's house. So they're both ghosts. They're transparent. And George realizes they aren't in heaven, and there must be some sort of reason for this, and maybe they need to do some kind of good deed first in order to get in. And, a quick side note here. For a 1930s film, there were some really good special effects. I really liked how they did the fading and the invisibility gimmicks. More on that as we go, but this was something that really stood out to me in the film. It's very well done. Well, Topper, meanwhile, finds out about the death of his friends, George and Marion. He's a little bit upset about that. And shortly after, he purchases their car. Now, it's been repaired and restored, and he goes and takes it for a ride. He's kind of slowly experimenting with the wild side a little bit, I guess. And as things go in these wacky comedies, the tire blows out and he ends up stopping around the point where the crash had taken place. And it's here that he meets with the ethereal George and Marion, who explain to him that, they can only appear in limited amount of times, using this ectoplasm to appear. I hear ectoplasm and I think, Ghostbusters. But anyhow, Ghostly George goes ahead and he starts repairing the tire for his car. And this was a really fun scene because he's invisible. So the tire and the equipment, you just see him go flying through the air and reattach, and really neat practical effects for the 1930s. It reminds me of some of the effects that we saw with The Invisible Man from 1933 with Claude Rains. So the two ghosts ask him to drive them back to their penthouse where they have drinks together, and it's here that George and Marion, they figure out that reforming Topper might be the key to getting into heaven. I guess. So they get Topper to have some drinks, and he lightens up a little and it gets all loopy. And a credit to actor Roland Young. There's a very funny scene where he's leaving the hotel and he's essentially being carried by the invisible ghosts. And it's basically just him doing a really funny bit of physical humor. I honestly laughed at this scene, how goofy it was watching, Roland Young pull this off. You got to watch the movie for stuff like that. And so once outside, there's a big crowd and a big scuffle takes place. Not really as much with Topper, but more so his invisible friends. And because of this scuffle, Topper ends up getting arrested and he goes before a judge. He's like half drunk and they think he's been brawling and so on. And his wife Clara is really shocked, just shocked, and thinks that this behavior will be the ruin of their social standing. But as things turn out, important people will later show up and meet with her. They are intrigued by Topper's new, bold behavior. So Topper goes to work the next day and everyone kind of looks at him differently, a little more appreciation. Now, Marion, the ghost, shows up. And she starts getting really friendly with him, begging for him to take her out for an ice cream soda. I love these old movies. What follows is a trip to a clothing store where, the invisible Marion is causing undergarments to float by and spooking some of the patrons. And Topper leaves, but at home, Clara discovers that he still somehow has this lacy garment that he was going to give to Marion. Because, ghosts apparently still need underwear, I guess. So she gets all upset about that. There's a fight, and Topper just packs up and leaves. And he's on his way to the Seabreeze Hotel, and while he's driving, Marion appears next to him, and she wants to go with him. Now, George isn't here at this part, and note, I did find myself wondering, what's going on with Marion? She seems to really be taking this affection of Topper a little bit too far. I mean, she is a ghost after all, but whatever, it's a silly movie, so don't read too much into it, move on. At the hotel, Topper checks in alone, but the hotel detective hears the voice of Marion in the room, talking about drinks and whatnot, and he starts to get suspicious, but he can't prove anything. At the hotel restaurant, Topper wants to go dancing with Marion, but George shows up around this point, and he's angry, and there's some ghostly pandemonium that follows. And as it's near the end of the film, as I do with these reviews, I'm going to leave the review here and I'll let you go check this one out for yourself. It's a lot of fun. Just some closing thoughts. This reminded me of films like It Happened One Night or Thin Man, which are two films I watched recently and reviewed. It's just a silly, madcap comedy from the 30s. It's plenty of fun. And I'll say this too. I came into this film thinking this was more of a Cary Grant movie, but truth be told, he isn't in the film quite as much as I expected. And honestly, I think Roland Young really steals the film here. He's the star, and his ability to play this mousy little fella who gradually changes his life around through the influence of these ghostly characters is really fun to watch. And again, his physical antics, they are a hoot. I just love watching him stagger around half drunk, supposedly being carried by ghosts. Constance Bennett is gorgeous and funny, but again, not sure what the deal was with her affectionate pursuit of Topper. Madcap, zany humor, I guess. And again, kudos to those cool Invisible Man-style special effects, such as one scene where Marion is in the room, she's standing there smoking, she exhales and vanishes, but the cigarette and the smoke remain. I know it's just little things, but considering how old this film is, it's really great how they pulled this off without CGI or any of that stuff. Apparently there were 2 sequels made to this film. There's Topper Takes a Trip from 1939 that also starred Constance Bennett and Roland Young, I guess no Cary Grant. And also Topper Returns in 1941. And that also stars young Burke and Joan Blondell. So I guess they mixed up the crew a little bit, but I'm going to still check these out anyway. Apparently a television series also followed, and this was based on the characters. And it ran from 1953 through 56 on CBS. And they even made a television movie about it in 1979. So, wow, this has had, quite an extended life. But I really enjoyed this, and I'm looking forward to catching the 2 sequels. So that's Topper from 1937. It is a fun film worth checking out. And also a quick side note while I was kind of researching the film. Topper and Marion have drinks in the film called a Pink Lady. And, well, my channel's for all ages. I keep it clean and wholesome. So if you're looking for a G-rated version of this drink, while researching this, I found out you can get a Pink Lady at your local Sonic. Basically just ask for a Sprite with cherry juice and vanilla cream. And that'll put you right into a delightful sugar coma.